Listening to that speech, and I've heard that speech many, many times, and it always strikes me as what could have been. I was just reflecting today that I had a very good friend, Bill Polk. Many of you might have known him. He was a somebody who was on the State Department's Policy Planning Council during the Kennedy administration, and during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was on the advisory team that advised John F. Kennedy about the crisis. He was there as this situation unfolded, and he and I have talked prior, many times about his experiences and about arms control and disarmament, and how we lost our compass. And one of the things we talked about is what would have happened if John F. Kennedy had a chance to fully implement the vision that he outlined in April of 1963. What would have happened if an assassin's bullet hadn't struck him down in November? What if he had lived? What would the world have looked like? And we had many conversations about it. And I remember we were at the home of a mutual friend, and he said, "Why don't you guys write a book? It'll be a work of historical fiction, but one of you take the Russian side, the other take the American side, and write a book about what the world would have looked like had Kennedy had a chance to move forward." Because he was that speech outlines many things. I think people forgot that John F. Kennedy was responsible for the creation of the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency. And that Arms Control and Disarmament Agency breathed life into the vision of disarmament that he outlined in his speech. I am somebody who benefited from this. The Arms Control and Disarmament Agency played a very important role in negotiating the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, the treaty that got rid of intermediate range missiles that were threatening regional and global security in Europe when they were introduced by the Soviets, then later by the United States. This treaty, signed in 1987, implemented in 1988, got rid of these missiles. And it gave us that moment of peace. But what would have happened if Kennedy had been alive, and maybe we wouldn't have had that arms race that led to the necessity of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, because he recognized the dangers of nuclear weapons, as did Khrushchev, two men whose nations were taken to the brink of the nuclear apocalypse. What happened if he would have lived? Would Khrushchev have survived the Brezhnev coup? And could have moved on? We don't know, and we'll never know. But what we do know is that today we have diverged so far from the vision of John. We are literally the exact opposite on almost every issue that he has outlined. We have gone in the exact opposite direction. And today we find ourselves in a very, very dangerous situation. Without fear of being seen as fear mongering, I can say that this is the situation we face today is an order of magnitude more dangerous than the situation that John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev faced during the Cuban Missile Crisis. One of the main reasons is that we had diplomacy back then. We were actually talking to the Soviets. We had a direct line. Kennedy talked about the phone, but no, he was in communication with Khrushchev. He had a back channel, a front channel. There was talks at the United Nations. There was communication, and because of this communication, they were able to agree to the necessity of avoiding a war and reach compromise solutions and avoid a conflict that could have gone nuclear. Today, we have no connectivity. There's no talking. The Russian ambassador, one of the most qualified men who has ever served as the Russian ambassador to the United States, Anatoly Antonov, the man who negotiated the last remaining arms control treaty, New START, that expires in February of next year, an expert in the United States, spent 7 years in Washington, D.C., and nobody talked to him. Nobody talked to him. His defense attaché was a strategic rocket forces guy. The interesting thing is when he was coming into the military as a junior officer, he was with an SS-25 Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Regiment outside of Novosibirsk, and I inspected his unit in April of 1990. What a small world we live in. But arms control is dead today. There is no arms control. And we have a situation John F. Kennedy warned about. He said, do not allow yourself to get into a situation where the only choice you have made is humiliation. annihilation or nuclear war. Well, we are in that situation. We're the country, the United States now, that faces a situation where we either have to yield to Russia on Ukraine, to capitulate, or we have to confront Russia decisively in a manner that will inevitably lead to nuclear war. We don't have the courage to capitulate, even though we are in the wrong on this one, in my opinion. And we have the stubbornness and the ignorance and the hubris and the national narcissism that will lead us to the path of nuclear confrontation. I'll leave it with this. Admiral Buchanan, Rear Admiral Buchanan, a spokesperson of the Strategic Command, that is the military unit responsible for all of our nuclear materials, in commenting on Russian Vladimir Putin's signing of a new nuclear doctrine for the Russians that lowers the threshold of use of nuclear weapons because of the confrontational posture the United States has taken with Russia regarding Ukraine, said, while we want to avoid nuclear war, America is ready for a nuclear exchange with Russia. Just let that thing sink in for a minute. America is ready for a nuclear exchange with Russia. A nuclear exchange with Russia would kill 100 million Americans, minimum. There is no such thing as limited nuclear war. And yet, our military, at a time when our government is leaning forward aggressively in a posture that is not just possible to have a nuclear conflict, but at this point in time, probable, says, yeah, we're ready. We're willing to get into a nuclear exchange with Russia, so long as we win, we prevail, and we believe we can win. And there's the ultimate sickness. The United States today believes that they can fight and win a nuclear war at a time when we need every ounce of restraint to avoid a nuclear war. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most dangerous period in American history since nuclear weapons have been, since the advent of nuclear weapons. And we don't have sound leadership. We don't have sound principles. We would do very well nationally if we could all listen to JFK's speech that he delivered at American University and guide ourselves by those principles. That's a waning hope. I'll turn it over to Raymond now.
Thanks, Scott.